The Deep Dive, Jolly John Nash, and the Birth of Victorian Comedy.
Join us for a fascinating deep dive into the life of Jolly John Nash, the bankrupt Victorian coal merchant who accidentally became a pioneer of English music hall comedy. We explore how Nash invented the laughing song, pioneered the funny walk, and charmed audiences from London to New York. Discover the wild true story of the 19th century entertainer who rubbed shoulders with Charles Dickens, claimed to have lunched with U.S. presidents, and committed the ultimate Victorian faux pas by slapping the Prince of Wales on the back. Tune in for an engaging journey through music hall history, stage fright, and the contagious power of a good laugh. Keywords: Jolly John Nash, English music hall, Victorian comedy history, laughing songs, 19th century comedian Charles Dickens, Prince of Wales, historical entertainment.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to just imagine the scene for a second. The chaotic, kind of grimy energy of a 19th century English theater.
Oh yeah, thick with smoke.
Exactly. Thick smoke, gas lights are hissing away, and the crowd is just rowdy. They're distracted, they're demanding to be entertained, and out walks this massive man.
Right, and he doesn't do what you'd expect.
No, he doesn't launch into a delicate ballad or, rely on some complex wordplay to win them over. He just stands there, he looks out at this sea of faces and begins to shake with mirth.
Just a deep, rumbling chuckle.
Right, echoing right through the hall. And he leans into it, laughing so genuinely that the audience's defenses immediately drop. Within seconds, the entire theater is swept up in this unstoppable chorus of contagious laughter.
It's a brilliant psychological trick.
It really is. So today, you and I are looking at how a bankrupt coal merchant kind of accidentally invented modern physical comedy. Our mission for this deep dive is to trace the unlikely rise of Jolly John Nash.
A fascinating guy.
A man who pioneered laughing songs, took his act across the globe, and committed what might be the most catastrophic social error in Victorian history. Okay, let's unpack this, because jumping from the heavy industry of coal to the gaslit stages of London is a massive pivot.
It is a remarkable pivot. And looking at the sources we have today, this isn't just your standard biography.
Right.
It's really a look at the mechanics of early popular entertainment and how a devastating failure in one respectable profession can serendipitously lead to pioneering another.
Yeah.
We're going to examine the acoustics of Victorian comedy, early global touring, and the unspoken rules of society that ultimately caught up with him.
Let's start with his life before the stage, because the contrast is just staggering. He was born on March 7th, 1828 in Minchinhampton, Gloucestershire.
Deep in the countryside.
Yeah. His father, James Nash, was a cloth worker, and his mother was Martha. And looking at his 20s, he was on a really, really traditional path.
Very respectable.
He studied music, he learned the cornet, and even worked as a choir and bandmaster. But the sources emphasize that music was purely a respectable civic hobby at this point.
That distinction is crucial. You have to remember, in the mid-19th century, being a choir master was a mark of respectability. But the theater,
Totally different world.
deeply disreputable. Nash was building a solid industrial life. In 1854, he married Margaret Brown.
And they moved into York Lodge, right?
Right, York Lodge near Park End in
Yeah.
the Forest of Dean. And the 1861 census gives us this very clear snapshot of his economic status. He is listed as a coal master.
A fire brickmaker, too.
Exactly, a fire brick maker and a coal and coke merchant. He was the co-owner of the Oaken and Churchway Level Colliery. He was even active in campaigns to establish a local volunteer force.
So what does being a coal master actually entail in the 1860s? Because we aren't just talking about a guy selling bags of coal on the street.
Oh, not at all. A coal master was an industrialist. He was managing the logistics of extraction, dealing with labor forces, handling the transport of heavy materials,
Which sounds incredibly expensive.
and carrying immense personal financial liability. There were no modern corporate protections like we have today.
So if something goes wrong,
If a vein ran dry, or a shaft flooded, or the market price of coke dropped, the financial ruin fell directly on the owners.
wow.
And that volatility is precisely what upended his life.
Because the records show that the hammer drops in 1864. The colliery business completely fails, and Nash is officially declared bankrupt.
The total collapse.
For a family man living at York Lodge, deeply embedded in the civic life of Gloucestershire, what does bankruptcy actually mean in 1864?
It meant total social death. The Victorian era, it equated moral worth with financial solvency. Bankruptcy wasn't just a bad quarter.
It was a moral failing.
A public disgrace that severed you from polite society entirely. You lost your property, your credit, and your peers.
But I guess that complete loss of respectability meant Nash no longer had a reputation to protect.
That's the silver lining.
Yeah.
He was a 36-year-old man desperate for income, and he happened to be familiar with the London music halls.
Which is where he meets Charles Morton.
Right. Charles Morton, the impresario, known as the father of the halls. He ran the Canterbury and Oxford music halls. Morton took a massive gamble and put this bankrupt industrialist on his stage.
Which seems crazy to me. Why would Morton risk his stage on an amateur? Did Morton just need a warm body? Or was there a specific mechanic to the music halls that made Nash a good fit?
Morton understood the environment of his own venues. Music halls were not quiet, seated theaters.
They were more like pubs, right?
Essentially, massive pubs with a stage attached. Patrons were drinking, eating, talking, moving around. You needed performers who could command a room through sheer force of presence.
And Nash was a big guy.
A very large man with a booming choirmaster's voice. Morton likely saw a guy who had the sheer acoustic power to cut through the ambient noise of a rowdy crowd.
Even so, the records note that despite his size and booming voice, Nash was initially paralyzed by stage fright.
Oh, completely terrified.
Which makes sense. He had zero professional experience. Think about how many times you felt imposter syndrome when completely starting over in a new field.
Oh, absolutely. It's universally relatable.
Yet he pushed through that sheer terror and quickly found his footing. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because Nash doesn't just sing traditional ballads.
Right. He reinvents himself.
He developed a highly specific stage persona. He bills himself as Jolly John Nash, and sometimes the laughing blacksmith, leaning into his industrial roots. What did this act actually look like?
The genius of his act was psychological and acoustic. The music historian Peter Gammon described Nash as a large man who shook with mirth as he sang.
A laughing song.
Exactly. He pioneered what became known as the laughing song. He had a repertoire of comic tracks with titles like The Nice Old Maids, Sister Mary Walked Out Like That I Couldn't Help Laughing, The Convivial Man, and his own arrangement of Little Brown Jug.
Singing a comic song is one thing, but how do you turn laughter into an instrument?
By bypassing polite applause and triggering an involuntary physical response from the audience. Think about the physical stamina required to generate authentic-sounding, contagious laughter on cue.
Night after night.
Night after night, for 15 minutes at a time. It's an incredible acoustic trick. Subtle wordplay often gets lost in a noisy music hall, but laughter is a loud, percussive sound.
Right.
When the audience sees a massive, jolly man genuinely shaking with mirth on stage, mirror neurons fire. The audience begins to laugh simply because he is laughing.
So he wasn't just singing?
No, he was weaponizing a deeply primal, communal human experience to control the room.
And the sources point out he was also utilizing physical comedy. He was an early practitioner of the funny walk.
A staple we still love today.
Exactly, heavily featured in his song Sister Mary Walked Like That. He is combining contagious audio with exaggerated, ridiculous visual comedy pioneered way back in the mid-1800s.
It was a full sensory approach to comedy, and it was so effective that his rise was astronomical. Just 2 years after his humiliating bankruptcy, by 1866, he became the chairman of the Strand Music Hall.
Let's clarify that role, because being the chairman of a music hall isn't a corporate board seat, is it?
Far from it. The chairman was the ultimate master of ceremonies. He sat at a special table facing the audience, right at the front of the stage,
Right in the thick of it.
banging a gavel to introduce the acts, keeping the rowdy crowd in line, and constantly taking drinks bought for him by the patrons.
Wow.
It required immense charisma, an iron liver, and unparalleled crowd control skills. For a former coal master to dominate the Strand Music Hall in this capacity within 24 months of bankruptcy shows a staggering level of adaptability.
His cultural footprint became massive. By 1865, Charles Dickens was already mentioning him in his publication, Household Words, affectionately calling him Jolly John.
High praise from Dickens.
But this momentum eventually sets up a collision course. In February of 1868, Nash and a fellow performer named Arthur Lloyd achieved something completely unprecedented in music hall history.
A massive turning point.
They are invited to perform for the Prince of Wales, who would later become King Edward VII, at an event hosted by Lord Carrington.
This gig represented the merging of two completely isolated worlds. The music hall was the domain of the working and middle classes. It was viewed as terribly vulgar by the aristocracy.
So this was a big deal.
Inviting music hall performers to entertain the heir to the British throne was a massive concession, and a highly experimental piece of social mixing.
So you have Jolly John Nash, the laughing blacksmith, standing in front of the future king. And the crazy thing is, the act works. The Prince of Wales was reportedly delighted by the performance.
They loved him.
The room is enjoying it, but then, in a moment of pure, unthinking jollity, Nash reaches out and slaps the Prince of Wales on the back.
The ultimate faux pas.
Can you imagine the temperature dropping in that room? You are a working-class performer. You have just physically struck the royal air. Time must have completely stopped.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer panic of that moment stems from the absolute rigidity of Victorian social boundaries. The royal family was not just wealthy.
They were untouchable.
They were viewed with an almost religious reverence. The rules of engagement were strict. You did not speak until spoken to, and you never, under any circumstances, initiated physical contact.
And Nash treated the future King of England the same way he would treat a patron buying him a pint at the Strand Music Hall.
Exactly. It was an act of casual impertinence that shattered the illusion of respectable distance.
The consequence was immediate, wasn't it? I mean, he wasn't thrown in the Tower of London, but he was completely cut off.
He was instantly ostracized by the prince thereafter. That single slap resulted in absolute and immediate social exile from royal favor. He had breached the invisible wall that kept the classes safely separated in the Victorian mind.
But the loss of royal favor didn't end his career. Instead, he simply took his act to audiences who didn't care about British royal protocol.
A smart business move.
In 1874, he became a transatlantic pioneer. He was one of the very first British music hall stars to cross the ocean and tour the United States. Taking a full company across the Atlantic in the 1870s must have been a logistical nightmare.
Oh, it required weeks on steamships, organizing rail travel across vast American distances, and securing bookings without modern telecommunications.
A huge risk.
It was a massive financial risk. There was no guarantee that an English music hall act would translate to an American audience.
But the reviews indicated it translated perfectly. The New York Herald wrote that within minutes of his first appearance, he convinced the audience he wasn't vulgar, but a genuine, genial, and artistic humorist.
They really got him.
The reviewer noted, his humor is so infectious that no sooner does he enter into one of his inimitable laughing songs than the whole audience at once gives way and a chorus of laughter is raised.
What's fascinating here is that the Herald Review proves his technique bypassed cultural and geographic borders entirely. Subtle political satire or hyper-local London street slang would have failed in New York.
Like they wouldn't understand the references.
Exactly. But contagious laughter requires no localized cultural context. An audience in Manhattan had the exact same physiological reaction to his mirth as an audience in London. Laughter was his universal passport.
He leaned into that global appeal hard. He toured the U.S. again in 1876. A decade later, in 1886, he embarked on a grueling 18-month tour of the United States with his own company.
Incredible stamina.
And in 1889, he went even further, taking his act to Australia. The Australian press praised him as a world-renowned vocalist, a capital raconteur, and highlighted his skills as an admirable executant on both the concertina and the cornet.
It highlights how multi-talented he was. He wasn't just laughing. He was playing multiple instruments and telling stories. He was a one-man variety show. And he was deeply aware of his own global status. He frequently boasted that he had sung in every state, shaken hands with 3 presidents, and lunched with 2.
That's amazing.
It is a brilliant piece of PR. He's essentially saying, the Prince of Wales might have rejected me, but the leaders of the free world invite me to lunch.
As he moved into his later years, he also focused heavily on the community he helped build. In 1891, he published a book of anecdotes titled The Merriest Man Alive.
A fitting title.
He even went back to the Forest of Dean to perform in 1893, returning to the very area where his colliery had collapsed 30 years earlier. But what stands out in the sources is his philanthropy.
Having experienced catastrophic financial ruin early in his life, Nash understood the precarious nature of the entertainment industry.
He lived it.
He had. He became deeply involved in benefit shows and eventually served as the president of the Music Hall Sick Fund Providence Society. He worked to ensure that performers who fell on hard times had a financial safety net.
And that goodwill was returned to him when his own health began to fail. Massive legends of the era, performers like George Robey, Dan Leno, and Florrie Ford, organized massive fundraising events specifically to support him.
A true community effort.
But the sources also indicate that the industry was leaving him behind. By the time he mounted his final tour of the United States in 1900, His style was faltering.
The entertainment landscape had fundamentally shifted by 1900. The world was on the brink of vaudeville, early cinema, and much faster-paced comedic styles.
Things were moving quicker.
The image of the Jolly Victorian singing a 15-minute laughing song felt incredibly archaic to the new generation of theatergoers. Popular entertainment is a relentless machine, and the foundations Nash laid had been built over by newer, sharper acts. He returned to England and passed away in Fulham, London, in October 1901 at the age of 73.
So, what does this all mean? When we look back at the historical records of Jolly John Nash, we were seeing the blueprint for modern physical comedy. We see a man who survived the brutal social death of Victorian bankruptcy by inventing the laughing song and popularizing the funny walk.
An incredible legacy.
He utilized his massive presence and acoustic power to control rowdy theaters, charming everyday workers in London, newspaper critics in New York, and presidents in Washington, even if his jolly nature cost him the favor of the British crown.
His journey demonstrates to you that a catastrophic failure might actually be the catalyst needed to uncover a completely different set of skills. His bankruptcy removed the burden of respectability, allowing him to take a risk on a stage that a wealthy coal master never would have considered.
It's a great reminder for anyone listening.
Furthermore, his global success reinforces that genuine joy and physical comedy are universally understood, capable of breaking down cultural barriers in a way that language simply cannot.
Because even when the coal business collapses, you might just be one funny walk away from reinventing your life. Before we sign off today, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
This raises an important question. Johnny John Nash built his livelihood and international reputation on being the merriest man alive. His brand was defined by unpretentious approachability and infectious jollity.
That's who he was.
Yet, when he acted with that exact same authentic familiarity in the presence of the Prince of Wales, he was instantly ostracized. Where is the line between our authentic selves and the strict roles society demands we play? When does being entirely true to your own nature cross the invisible boundary and become a liability?
The tension between the performer's authentic nature and the rigid demands of society. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Jolly John Nash and the mechanics of Victorian comedy. We hope his story brought a bit of contagious laughter to your day. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.